Oh, it's this one then, right?
Now I can see your Google.
Oh, okay. But how do I? Oh, now she.
Yeah, it's like right here.
I'm gonna do it again. Right?
Those sweatbands from somewhere.
Okay, you can see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. All right, so I'd like to actually look at the interior.
I really like the aesthetic.
Yeah, it's
I
quite
like it a lot better. There's a little bit better than the other ones. I don't know why.
This is what's in the reading. Oh, it's so small. Okay, let's see. We'll look at it here. So these are some of the patterns. Everybody? I'm working here now. We're up and running. So you have here some of these same patterns that they have in the pots, on the blankets and so on, actually in the interior. And I think, was it body art too in this case as well? Or did I make that up?
You may be right.
So these are some of the patterns that they use to decorate. So the decoration that we need to realize is more than just decoration. Remember how we talked about this? This is an important theme, right, throughout the class. This idea that decoration is ornamental, therefore feminine, and relatively unimportant. And that's not true in most of the cases that we've looked at. Oftentimes ornaments or certain patterns can have meaning. So in this case, do you remember what some of the patterns mean?
Wasn't like fertility, prosperity, and like good luck and stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think love and
yeah, it's like very lovey, kind of like female sort of. Like
yeah, I mean they're female kind of concepts. So in other words, it's kind of coded, which is kind of interesting.
Something that I found to be interesting was that in the video they talked about like the women telling stories and what the gaps and not gaps meant, but I didn't see that mentioned in the reading. Is that something that's typical of the culture?
I think so. Well, the reading, you're right, the reading doesn't talk about it quite so much. It just talks about it in terms of, I don't remember what it says now, as being coded, sort of a visual language. But you're right, it doesn't say more than that. It said sometimes, yeah.
Because that was my favorite part of the movie, and so it was just interesting that it didn't touch on that necessarily in the reading.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, it's very empowering. I mean, if presumably this is a feminine language, so it's from one woman to another. The other cultures that I've studied, they have a similar kind of thing. It's more universal, well, within the culture. It's across genders. But I mean, I don't think she comes out and says it, but you get the implication that this is woman to woman.
Well, I imagine with men not doing pop,
Yeah.
they wouldn't know.
Yeah, I just kind of assumed that was implied.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know there's in Ghana, there's some, but it's sort of decorative patterns that convey meaning. But again, men and women are taught that. So it's kind of interesting to get. It's kind of an inside joke, and an inside knowledge, which you can't help but wonder is a factor in how this is, how they've been able to continue this in the face of outside influence. It's kind of coded, but they can't really be a part of it. So yeah, I found that interesting too, Morgan. So yeah, I think it's on page. Yeah, it's on page 128, if anyone has the reading open. So they talk about the abstract designs and configurations can be given names, which are only for the convenience of identification, but then they also say that secondly, these designs can be clearly representational, in which case the objects they represent may have connotations or associations or complete symbolic significance. So maybe some of those are more easily understood by men. Thirdly, designs may have signifiers, and this is where it gets interesting. signifiers, semiotics.
Yeah, I was just
Yeah.
Signified, signifier.
It's the same thing, right? And they're saying that it's basically, again, a code. It means something. Superficially, it represents something, but it's really what it's associated with, the connotations. Remember connotation, deconnotation? It's the association is where the real meaning is, which isn't necessarily inherent in the symbol. So again, you would need to know, right? It wouldn't be obvious.
Like pictographs.
Well, pictographs are usually made to be legible, right?
I guess in my head I didn't associate it. I mean, there were symbols that meant things, but I didn't associate it as strongly with the sense of a whole nother like secret language. But I can see how they would be connected.
Yeah. So again, thirdly, designs can be signifiers, apparently abstract geometric configurations to the untrained eye that's signifying particular things to an informed audience, just like reading a word. These in turn can carry meanings of a direct, associated, or symbolic nature. So for instance, they use example, do you remember this, the wiggly line, which you think snake, but then the snake might actually be reference to a myth or something. So not the myth in the Bart sense, right? But, a story.
I have a question. In the literary criticism class, we talked about how language is a masculine concept in some way. So if women are using these symbols for other women and they're feminine motifs, would that language still be considered a masculine concept?
Well, in a way, you could argue. I'm sure there'd be people out there that have or would argue. And I would that it's kind of a means of resisting the patriarchy of language. This is something we talked about in the class. Language tends to be seen as being patriarchal. I won't go into the whys. There's a lot of theory around it. And in some cases, like you said, you can see this, maybe you could argue it, that this is a means of resisting that, right? I'm not going to enter into your patriarchal world of, maybe even they have to, right? Maybe these women speak. It's not like we're saying they're mute. But by creating their own visual language, so to speak,
But is that necessarily fighting patriarchy or just finding a way to express things that you can't necessarily express because it's not
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, I hadn't thought of that way. Is it just a means of expressing what they couldn't with
an
That's
outlet?
how I've always
spoken
thought of it.
language.
Yeah.
I can't say political things while I'm quilting this or I'm making this because that's man's work.
Oh, you mean it's something that it would be socially acceptable to say?
Well,
I thought you meant that the language doesn't allow me to say it. Is that what you meant?
no, I just meant if kind of in the way men are more encouraged to speak and talk and say these things,
Oh, I see.
in that sort of way they can't really
Oh,
get to that
I
way,
see.
so they form their own.
So they don't feel like they have a voice. So this
and
gives
this
them a
gives
voice.
them a voice.
Yeah. No, I would have thought that is true based on the limited information we have. I mean, really, there's not a lot out there on this. I mean, it even says that there hasn't been a lot of research out there for various reasons. There's not a lot of work done on these pots. I don't remember, there was an interesting reason why. Yes, because brown pots became more valued. So research has been done on the brown pots that are, I guess, valued. I guess what they mean by valued is, because I interpret that as more commercially. Yeah. But she says that within the same context of talking about the lack of research. So I thought maybe I could be wrong. But anyway, in other words, our culture, Western culture, who does the majority of this research, doesn't value these. And so that's why there's very little research on them. So we really can speculate here because, we don't know a lot about it. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see exactly the role of language here. And also don't forget, in a lot of languages, you can't say what you want to say in a language, but you don't know you can't say it.
I didn't realize how limiting language could be until there's this video on YouTube, different words in other languages that we don't have,
Yeah.
form of in English. Did we talk about some sort of German word in the literary criticism class that had this meaning that wouldn't translate to English, but it was a really, really long German word? And then Italians have a word for the water ring left on the table by a glass. They have a word for that ring, and we just have to describe it. So I can only imagine what you're not getting when you're trying to explain emotions.
Yeah, so maybe, yeah, you're right, if it's emotional and there isn't a way of explaining
Right,
it.
like what if the word love was never invented? How do you describe that?
Right.
You could use more words, but.
That's true, but it'd be, love is just a nice little shorthand. But then I guess they would use like the little, like a pictograph of something that would represent love. I don't know.
Well, it's essentially what they've done, you could argue. I mean, I don't know whether love is a word.
I'll just
Assume that, well, I mean, I know Arabic, but I don't know if there's a native language as well.
I don't know. Wait, never mind. I guess it would depend on what their marriages are based on.
But, and this is, talking about the origins of it, I think it's worth talking about. We don't know a lot about the origins because, as I said, we don't really know a lot of it that's there. They do claim in the video, let's look at the pottery real quick while we're on here, and then I'll take it off so that we can see more of it again. And then we'll come back to my thought there. So look at some of the pottery. And they talked about some of the symbolism, like the egg, the egg cup kind of thing, and that, which we won't go into since you read that. I mean, what do you think? I mean, it is kind of interesting that, do you think this has, I mean, I kind of wonder if one reason these haven't become particularly commercial. I mean, they are now, right? But, well, even to a certain extent, it doesn't sound like they're that commercial. I mean, they're producing them, but obviously, there's not that much of a demand because the idea is that they're under threat, right? So do you think part of it is that it doesn't appeal to our European notion of, or perception, I should say, of African pottery, which we would tend to think as being more sort of rustic? Because it's kind of in between the nice glazed Western aesthetic and the rustic. It's neither one or the other, and I wonder if that's why.
Well, if it's a little bit, like if it has more traits that are similar to like European styles, wouldn't that make it more appealing? Because it'd be like more easily understood because it does resemble European stuff more. But then it'd be like dipping your toe in the exotic a little bit. So if it's like in the middle, it seems like it'd be more pleasing.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, but it could be off-putting. Like if you see
That's
European, whatever, like this is what I have, and you see that, and you're like, well, I see it, but it's kind of weird, so no.
Yeah,
It could go either way on that.
yeah.
I really like these. I think mostly because they always have like the weird shapes and they have all these long handles and the handles aren't necessarily rounded. They're all different directions. I like these aesthetics.
Yeah, okay, well, that's what I was going to ask you. What do you think about these in terms of your aesthetic, Western
I
aesthetic?
like how several of those are doubled, like it's the same thing and then like a mirror image connected to each other. Where the handles are doubled on each side and they resemble each other.
Yes.
Like I like that dual, like pluralistic. I don't know, that's just
And I don't know if this is true in this case, but certainly with the pottery from South America, traditionally, it is very symbolic. This idea of duality, male, female, yin, yang. So I don't know if that's the case here or not. Let's look at this one because this is actually from an academic website, so at least we know we're looking at something fairly genuine, right? So in terms of the aesthetic, what do you think?
I don't like how lopsided it is.
Okay.
Yeah, it's
It
off-putting.
would not inspire a cynic moment for me.
No ecstasy.
No.
Well, I mean, and I think that might be why, because it sort of has the glaze, so it feels like it should be refined and symmetrical and balanced, but it isn't. So it's neither one nor the other.
I'm the weirdo, but I kind of like that it's like not even because that's part of like its charm that it's handmade and it's not made by like the factory.
But do you think if it maybe didn't have these designs on it, was a little bit more rustic, a little kind of more sort of raw, that it would make it like overtly raw and you'd like it? You see what I'm saying? Oh, no.
I feel like if the handles weren't like very symmetric on both sides, then like the off-putting lines would make it look better, but since they're like perfectly symmetric kind of, the off-putting line, like the unsymmetric line.
Okay, so you're seeing the asymmetry, it's hard because it's slightly at an angle, but you're seeing it more in the paint than the.
Yeah.
Yeah, like the handles, like they look like perfectly symmetric, but then the painting's like off, and that's like what's throwing me off and like making it unappealing.
Hey guys, we're recording, right? There's too many things to remember.
That's where am I? There.
Did you ask if you're recording?
Yeah,
Yeah, you are. It says live on it.
okay, great, thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, Morgan, what do you think of these aesthetically? I mean, I know we're looking at one, we could certainly look at others. Have any thoughts? Like them or don't like them? You don't have to have like a, an intellectual answer, but like, is this something you would buy?
I feel like if they made them more, I don't know, I usually like more colorful things, and they're all very like
Yeah.
neutral and earthy. I look that one. I would buy that one's really cool. Go right, go left. One of
Oh,
the
sorry, this one is on, it's a
bird.
see again, how it's kind of neither one or the other? Want me to get the same, Morgan?
So I did answer your question, but I forgot to turn my mic back on.
Oh, okay.
I was just saying that I was agreeing with everyone in the sense of like the lopsidedness and the handles in the other one looked almost like the kid did it, but then the center, the Aztec patterns that like we keep repeatedly seeing, I really like that.
You like the patterns on it, but not necessarily the way the pottery that
I
is
really
shaped?
like the one that's to the left of the bird.
Oh, that one. Well, again, that's very Western, right? And I wonder
Well, I like-
how genuine that might be.
I think this is just cultures mixing. What happens when, I don't
Well,
know.
don't forget though, I mean, this is, I mean, we're talking about like kind of, bigger issues here, right? But I mean, don't forget about it. Well, okay, no, I'm not gonna ask you. Do you think the fact that we as Western, people living in the Western world are drawn towards symmetry, drawn towards harmony, balance, refinement, is that innate or is that cultural? Because in other words, can these people make these things? Huh?
I think it's cultural.
Okay, good. Why would you say that?
Because you grow up with seeing things always symmetrical, then you really notice when it's not symmetrical. But if you grew up in, I think, a world where things were not, then, it wouldn't seem odd to you.
Yeah, and symmetry might actually be a little off-putting, right?
Yeah.
The reverse. It's hard to ever imagine that, but anybody agree or disagree with that?
Well, this might be a stretch, but I kind of think it's innate just because of this documentary that I watched.
Uh-huh.
It's called The Science of Sex Appeal, and it talked about how we're naturally more attracted to people with symmetrical faces and the golden ratio because you're supposed to grow symmetrically, like in the fetus or on your spine, and any disturbances, like during the pregnancy process, is how we become a little less symmetrical. And so, in that sense of like the human body and what we're supposed to look like, maybe that's where our eyes are drawn to the more symmetrical things.
Huh. Yeah, I've heard that too, actually. That's a good
I've actually
point.
watched that documentary before too.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I don't think I've seen the exact. It's like a Discovery Channel documentary. I think.
Yeah.
It's really good. It's really interesting.
What was it called again?
The Science of Sex Appeal.
Science of Sex Appeal. Yeah, I've heard that about the whole symmetry thing. So, but do you think that means it's both or just all innate?
I think that maybe because of just even tying it to humans, like how we are symmetrical or like supposed to be, that it's just something that we are right away introduced to.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it talks about how like you don't consciously like say, oh, her eyes, they're like the right proportion,
Right.
like apart.
Right.
Like you don't constantly say like, oh wow, his nose, right proportion.
Yeah.
But like you just like say like, oh, like he's attractive or she's attractive.
Yeah, and I
But
get.
like you just like kind of like unconsciously like your brain recognizes it.
So how do you, I mean, just throw something else in there, and I think this is a really, really good point, but, our notion of beauty obviously changes. So in a way, you could almost argue now, my husband and I have this debate all the time. This is like symmetrical beauty. I know we have here conversations, but he would say symmetry. And I'd say, oh no, that's just too boring and predictable. So it's like I would say like Uma Thurman, I think is pretty. He thinks she's hideous. But there's nothing like perfect about her face. It's a little wonky, right? But nowadays that's the aesthetic, right? So I'm not the only one. Do you know what I'm saying? So then that brings the culture back into it, which is why I bring this up.
Right. I think much like with any like instincts or things that we have going on in our like psyche right when we're born, it's something that can be modified with our culture. So it might be a reaction of both. So our culture just happens to emphasize what's already up there, while other cultures may just like not repressed, but like modified a bit to like where you prefer asymmetry.
Okay, that's a good point. So
And
it
then
might be born that way,
asymmetry-
but then it's altered by.
Yeah, and then
culture.
asymmetry can still have like an order to it.
Mhm.
It doesn't have to be chaotic just because it's diagonal. You can still make it look together.
Right.
So I
right.
mean, if you can be imperfectly perfect in a sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
maybe what we're getting at then instead of asymmetry and symmetry is just the sense of balance that's proposed to culture.
Right. So I'll just go off this, but let's look at these then. So we would say that's balanced.
I say it's balanced.
But you-
So they know obviously how to make the pot. It's very symmetrical in terms of craft.
Some of these though are a little, I don't know, it's hard to
I
tell.
really like those.
Do you like this?
I like that one.
And that doesn't look.
And then
It's hard to tell.
in one of our readings, didn't it have like a candelabra like candle thing? I like that one as well. I like that they're all. I like how all the handles are huge.
Yeah. Right, great, right. That's not balanced.
I would say it's balanced. It's balanced enough, like the colors and all that. Like
I
it
mean,
still has symmetry to it.
But like
Yes.
sorry, I was going to say asymmetry adds more interest to things sometimes. And it, like, I mean, the Leaning Tower of Pisa probably wouldn't be as cool if it wasn't leaning. Like, there's
Right.
always something that's
Yeah.
Right,
interesting.
which is again why I would find, this is really, I'm gonna show my husband on stage. So he thinks Kim Basinger. I don't even know who she is, but she's like the typical beauty, you know what I mean? It's just like so boring, you know? And like, that's why I like more unusual, you know? Like you said, it's something slightly off. But again, that's a personal taste.
Well, I've heard like the reason like we like symmetry and like proportion is because things that aren't symmetrical proportion, like in the human body, like our limbic system kind of register like somewhere in the back it registers that like you're ill and I don't want to like procreate with you because you're
Right,
ill.
this whole, yeah.
So, I mean, I guess maybe that's our obsession with symmetry, but then who you are and the higher brain is saying otherwise, and like your temper and all that is separate from
I
that.
mean, and also too, you could say, I mean, Western culture is based on, in large part, which culture? What should you say is the prominent culture in Western society historically? Who valued harmony and symmetry.
Oh, like Greek stuff,
Yeah,
classical stuff.
yeah. Which, just throw it in because then that seems to suggest it's more of a cultural thing.
We put all the Greeks on their little symmetrical pedestals and raise them up.
But I think it is interesting to think about how much aesthetics is determined by the culture and how much is innate. This is a really fascinating question. And not even aesthetics, but your understanding of the world. So I read there was this one culture, I can't remember where. It was not conditioned to looking at realism. So if they showed them like a picture of this is a pretty remote society in Africa. And if you showed them like a realistically rendered picture of an apple, they wouldn't know what it is. Because their brains can't register that that's 3D, big 2D, that equals that. Which is fascinating because it shows that we're socially conditioned to read art in this way, that it's not necessarily a natural way of creating things. I know I've kind of gone on something different there, but it's an interesting
That's okay.
idea, I think.
Between this and the language thing, it reminded me of this thing I read probably forever ago. It was talking about the ancient Egyptians and their uses of the colors black and blue interchangeably, because they didn't have a way to make blue. Well, they were one of the first cultures to have a way to make blue dye. So they were the first ones like to mass produce it and use it wild, like in a lot of different places. While beforehand, all the other cultures couldn't do that, so they would use blue and black interchangeably because their brains didn't register it as a separate color.
Okay, see, yeah, that's a
It was
first,
like,
and
oh,
we
the
look at
same
that, we're
thing.
like, that's impossible. But, I mean, we really, so much is.
It was the same thing because they just
Yeah.
they didn't even have a word in their language for the color
Right,
blue.
right.
It was the same
Just like, it's not that they're not intelligent, it's just that they've never seen anything realistically rendered, and so that almost seemed, it's not the way they see things. Which again, we tend to think realism is a norm, but it's a Western norm. It's not a universal norm. I would agree, I would argue. I'm sure there are people who disagree, but there's a lot of people who would agree with me, scholars. And which kind of goes back to the aesthetic thing, right? You know, just because you're human doesn't necessarily mean you're going to read things the same way. But yeah, maybe a bit of both then.
Realism is a thing for video games, Western, non-Western. Yeah.
Oh, well, nowadays, I mean, this is a remote, you know, they wouldn't have seen.
Oh, yes,
Well,
yes,
I mean, it's very hard to find that nowadays. I don't think that probably exists
Right.
anywhere in the world.
It's so rooted in Western culture because it's been there for so long. Like, realism, like, if a little kid can draw something realistically, that's the standard that they're going for. Like, ever since you're a little kid, the ones that were good at painting or drawing, whatever, it was because it was realistic. That's always been the standard.
In the West, yeah.
In the West.
And, you know, like China, to a certain extent, and the Asian culture also value realism. But certainly Africa, I mean, there are exceptions, but generally speaking, it doesn't value it. That's why they don't do it. It's not that they can't. They don't value it. That's not what they do. So again, here we're looking at, I would argue, a very different aesthetic, and maybe that's why we don't find these quite so appealing. Okay. Why do I just stop? No, Morgan should be back. Okay. All right. So let's see. Any other thoughts? Because we have spent a lot of time on that one. Any other ones? No? Okay. Let's talk about Blanco and Porus. Start with Blanco because she taught Dolores Porus and her husband, right? Anything particularly interesting you found about this reading, or anything that you brought up in the discussion board that you want to continue discussing? Okay, I'm going to be a pain and go back on screen share because we need to look at her work. Okay. Right. No thoughts? Is it too late? I'm sorry, I know it is late.
I found it interesting she was making ashtrays.
Yeah, again, how commercial can we get, right? Was it Theodora?
They look kind of cute.
Theodora? No. Was it Theodora? No.
T-E-O.
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay. So she's mostly known for making these, well, she calls them market women, but they're essentially these, what essentially are they?
Figures.
What kind of figure, though? What does it represent? What kind of women?
Pottery and their pots.
What kind of women? We're coming full circle here, beginning of the class. Huh? Yeah, and yeah, I mean, it says that they would be in market, and it's influenced apart from that, but it's also influenced by this nuales, which is, you guys catch this? I know there's a lot in the reading. It's a goddess. Yeah. So again, we could just look at these.
Wait, it's relevant sort of. Okay, going along with the idea, in so many of these cultures that women are the ones that make the figurines, women are the ones that depict themselves. For the Venus of Willendorf, that's probably made by a woman, isn't it?
What do you think based on this class?
On this class, I'm gonna say yes. I remember some of the previous theories were like, the guy making it as a fertility goddess to bring him luck or something. Or like,
Well, remember,
there's all
this is
these
what-
different things. It's like,
Remember, this is what Rachel brought up, right? With the
Yeah.
example she had. And this is actually, I think, brought up in one of the readings as well, the same point, that we assume it's made by a man unless we're told otherwise. And why is that?
not us, it's not we. It's
But
just
there's not enough proof that you could say it, right? But I don't know, a lot of this class is just sort of piecing together things and, you know, making some assumptions, but I mean, it's not like we're just basing it on nothing. But my instinct would tell me it's definitely made by a woman. Why would a man be making a fertility?
I have no idea. Maybe they Maybe fat people were the beauty standard and he wanted to have a pretty lady in his pocket. I don't know.
Early form of porn.
Yeah. I was trying to dance around that, but yes.
I love this photograph of her next to these.
Mm-hmm.
This wasn't in the reading, but I showed this to you. So these have really symbolic value, a lot of symbolic
I
value.
really love how a lot of the figurines, like the baskets are hollowed out so you can actually put something in a little tiny basket or.
And this is something that's interesting in actually both the K-Bio pops and here is this idea that, and many other pieces that we've looked at this semester, is that it's both utilitarian and ritual. So it's everyday, but it's also spiritual. And in the West, we tend to divide those. There's very much a divide, right? This whole idea of sacred spaces, you know? Whereas there is part of their lives. The spiritual is part of the daily.
The artwork multitask as much as the women do.
The what this?
The artwork multitask as much as the women do.
Yeah. And you know, it's talking about kind of utilitarian versus, you know, just art for art's sake. This is something that was brought up too in the Maria Martinez. Originally, the couple of pots would have been used as utilitarian, and then now, what do? We buy them and put them in museums and look at them.
Yeah, and then like the black ones, by the process they use to make them black, they're not waterproof, and it like takes some of their functionality away to have that look to them.
Right. Good point. We'll come back to this because I think it's quite interesting, and we'll be quick because I know it's getting late. But there was a quote I wanted to read here that I thought was very interesting. Okay. If you have this, doesn't have it out. It's again the connection between pottery or ceramic making and women. And I think we've seen enough evidence here that this is something we can say is pretty certain. So, can somebody read? Does somebody have it?
Which one?
It's the one on Blanco. So it's labeled for Leduc Multicultural, and I'm on page. It starts on the bottom of page 52. They're talking about this idea of the Nuale, right? This is what we're looking at here. Can somebody read that? I'll give you a chance.
Each person has a nuale. At night, the mother and the father put the newborn baby on the ground. Then they sit in a circle of ashes around the baby. The first animal to cross the ashes is the nuale of the baby and will protect the child for the rest of its life. One can tell what kind of animal it is by the paw prints. At night, the nuale
I was probably saying it wrong.
leaves the human body in search of the person's rival to attack him. The rival wounds or kills the the person at home is injured or dies.
Okay, can you keep reading?
Angela Vasquez at Zompa, whose sculpture is also inspired by Nuales, told me, according to the Zapotec legend, when a child is born, the parents must search for an animal spirit to become the child's protector. The placenta is laid along a straight line made by fire ashes outside the house. Whichever animal first crosses the line is the protector spirit. If something terrible happens to a protector animal, we suffer too.
Okay, so this talks about exactly what that is and this connection with the birth. But then later on, it says in the second paragraph down, the people's personal connection with the earth was explained by Dora Martinez Virgil, a friend of the Blanco family. She related that after the birth of her children, the umbilical cord was ritually buried in a small clay pot in the courtyard of her Oaxaca home. And I should say, I didn't tell you what, we're something about Oaxaca, right? It's just which country? We're going around the world in this class. We're in Northern Europe, and now we're flying over to Mexico, okay? So Oaxaca is what we're looking at. So this idea that when a child dies, they take the placenta, put it in a clay pot, and put it in the earth. So if there's any doubt, I think about this connection between women, the earth, pottery, and child raising, or rearing, or child bearing, I should say. I think that is another example of this connection. Okay, so she did a lot of amazing things. She was very, very, very successful. Who came to visit her? Rockefeller, yeah. So she was big time. She didn't seem to let it get to her very much. The fame. It sounds like she had a real market for her work. It's also worth pointing out that people took advantage of her, which I thought was really quite sad. So, like, she would send things back and then someone would take part of the money and she would get all of it. So again, kind of being taken advantage of, you know, if you're bring gender into this, I think it's gender and also the fact that, you know, she would have not been a particularly wealthy woman. Let's look real quickly at her, Horace's work. So this is the Oaxaca reading. I'll show this real quick because I know it's getting late. So the same area, and this is the work by Dolores Horace. Oh, this is a stamp. Is it? Can't tell. Maybe not. I think for me, what stood out in this reading is the wide variety of her work. I mean, some of this is really rustic and kind of childlike, and then some of it's extremely sophisticated. So if you know,
Sounds a bit like Picasso.
yeah, right, and yeah, that's a good point. And with Picasso, where we say, oh, you know, choosing to be childlike, it was, you know, but you know, we don't kind of give her the same benefit of the doubt. I mean, why don't we talk about her work? I mean,
Know about it?
well, no, but you have to ask why don't people know? I mean, if Rockefeller, she was a big thing in the West, that someone found her work attractive, and what I'm talking about is what we value as a society. And,
Right.
And obviously what this course is trying to do is revive interest in these types of art forms. What were we gonna say, Scotia?
Oh, as soon as I saw the mermaid on the plate and her boobs sticking up, it reminded me of the plates in the dinner party.
Yeah, how they're kind of three-dimensional.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to believe that this is made by the same artist, presumably because she does do that kind of, well, in her other pieces, she looks more like an angel, but it's hard to believe that this is by the same artist. This is the same person who produced this. Yeah. So it seems to be that this is a right we give modern artists in the West, especially men, but maybe not so much in terms of being able to, you know, you brought up Picasso, in terms of being able to, you know, go back and forth between really refined work and more.
I think it goes along with the fact that she was from a society that wasn't like considered like top, like fitting the ideal like developed countries, you know?
Right, yeah, I wasn't quite sure how to.
So they just were like, oh, she's gonna do that style and not gonna think about anything else, and then she's probably closed-minded or something.
Yeah.
You don't understand the idea that she could evolve.
Yeah, I think it's also worth noting. Did anybody notice the tone of this one? The porous one, the Oaxaca ceramics. With shoulders hunched and body tilted forward, she buries her hands in a massive charcoal breakaway. And then later on talks about, and her children all surrounding her. And that, would you talk about a male artist in this way? Yeah.
No, I found that to be so interesting at the beginning, how just detail oriented it was. And how
Right.
huge reflection of her work in general. But yeah, no, the dainty language that was used.
Yeah. You noticed that then too?
Oh, immediately, yeah.
Good. And again, this is something we need to be talking about if we're trying to look at art differently, right? Is why do we use this language for some and not for others? So I'm glad you noticed that. Okay, it's time to go, but we really do need to talk about Martinez because she's pretty amazing. So we'll talk about her at the beginning of class next week. So we've got a lot to fit in, but we'll do it next week. I will post the readings. If you have any questions from now and then, just email, okay? All right.
And you'll post the artists that were.
Yes. And if you don't mind, I'll just assign you. Right?
That's
Rather than
for
having
next
to
week,
choose.
right? That's for next week, right?
That's for next week.
Okay, so you got them up on Sunday?
Yes, up by Sunday, yeah. Okay, thanks, everyone. Thanks, Morgan. I'm sorry again about all the lost time earlier.
Yeah.
It's okay. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, have fun.
Thanks. I'll see you in like 3 weeks.
Okay. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Bye. She's going to Florence.
Wait, Italy?